What's up? What's up? What's up, people of the world? Welcome to I Was in This House podcast. I am your guest. I am your host, actually. I'm a little bit flustered. Because for the first time, pretty much ever, I have, I am doing this actually from my phone, and I I I had ample time to like prep and ample time to kind of get everything together, and I just for the life of me, I kind of ran out of time. I ended up I just had some technical difficulties, but here we are. At least the picture quality is good because it's an iPhone like 105. Um, Very cool. I'm super excited actually about this conversation today because it's definitely they definitely it's a pop in any case. I am just hyper focused on making sure that we have a really cool episode tonight, and I'd love to get into it. Before we do that, you'll notice my hat. This is the My Method AI hat. My Method AI. We're actually they're signing up a couple of incredible companies coming up pretty soon. It's an incredible AI employee, basically. Very cool, customizable, speaks in the accent of your market. Very cool. Very happy to have them as a sponsor. And Cooper and Hunter.us, Cooper and Hunter, VRF, VRV systems. They are just have been an incredible sponsor. So high quality HVAC systems, Cooper and Hunter.us. Today, I have an incredible guest. His name is Chris Buttenham,
Buttenham, but
But
that's close.
Buttenham.
Yeah.
I Here you are, and so I'm excited to have you, man. And why don't you just introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Everett. My name's Chris Buttenham. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Reins, and at Reins, we basically make it simple for contractors or other blue-collar businesses to give their key employees equity or a share of the profits.
Hmm. Yeah, and so the name sort of this podcast episode was I named it should you give your employees equity, right? I mean, it's kind of a hot topic. I've heard it kind of thrown around. I don't, I've heard some incredible companies that have done it and had great success. What Tell me about your story though. How did you end up doing this?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of a tale of two worlds. So I think I come by this problem honestly. My old man's a contractor. He owns a small commercial construction business, and I worked for him for about 5 years on the trucks. And he was always struggling to align his employees with the general goals of the business. And I would always talk to him about his, succession plan or lack thereof. And the plan was always that I wasn't going to take over the business for whatever reason. Him and I agreed on that, which is the case for a lot of independent owners now, right? Like families are not taking over businesses. And so what do, right? How do you incentivize the key folks that are in it? Either to take it over or even just so you can take a foot out. You hear this saying like, I want to work on the business, not in the business. So my dad was struggling to do this. And in a previous life, I'd actually started and sold a software company where we used equity-based compensation very effectively. It's very commonplace in startups or venture capital, private equity, right? These tools have historically really only been in the hands of those types of businesses. So I wondered why, businesses like my dad couldn't use this type of incentive to align his key employees and start planning for the future. And I learned it's for innocent reasons. It's really complex to do, particularly for your average, LLC, which is, most of these businesses, most of the independent businesses in this country, actually. It was tax headaches, legal headaches, and really it was just from first principles. Because I had sold my company, I was looking for a problem that I really wanted sink my teeth in and spend a lot of years solving. And so we decided this was a problem worth looking into. And so that was the inspiration behind Reins.
And you watched your dad kind of go through it and struggle with it. And so he was hiring laborers. He was hiring what kind of, I mean, what kind of contractors? Like, was he hiring like framers or?
He did like low voltage wiring, so camera systems, alarm systems, and access control. So he was hiring technicians, and also just like office staff and his GM, his operations manager. It was folks like that that he was really trying to get aligned. You know, on the technician side, it was a retention issue. On the manager side or office staff side, it was more an issue of alignment, right? How do we get these folks to act more like owners and show up?
Yeah, we have a legend in the chat here. Drew Cameron says great benefits for recruiting and retaining A players. Recommended him to your friend yesterday. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, very cool. So um, okay, but like my thing is this, like do you know about okay, so let me just talk about churn in a business, like when you churn over employees,
Yeah.
like talk about that, because I think that really is where it stems from, because like
Hmm. Hmm.
some business owners might say, hey, it's really, why would I want to share, I get it, aligned vision, but that's a really big responsibility. Talk about churn and the impact of churn on the business.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And I'd say two things. First, yeah, traditional equity is very onerous. It's very scary. And giving up a part of your business and creating new partners, that's not something I'd recommend for the average employee. You know, every once in a while, it makes sense, right? But yeah, businesses have all these employees. Retention, employee retention, especially in blue collar industries like the trades, where they're these folks are in such low supply, very high demand. It's creating this inflationary effect where folks will leave for a couple dollars on the hour, or a couple dollars more per
Yeah,
hour.
yeah, for sure.
The reality, and a lot of owners don't realize this, that Gallup did a study that said it costs on average 50 to 200% of an employee's salary to replace them. Once you factor in recruiting, once you factor in lost jobs and lost productivity, culture takes a hit. So it is a monumental cost when you churn employees. And so a lot of folks don't realize this. They're kind of used to it, right? They're calloused by the amount of churn that they have of employees, but they don't realize that there's lots of things that you can actually do.
Mm. And you were passionate about this because you watched your dad kind of go through it. That's such a cool origin story, because you watch it happen and you thought, so did you take the principles that you saw in sort of the IT world that you lived in and said, hey, why don't we do this, or how did that idea come about?
Yeah, exactly. And thank you for double clicking on that. So in tech, which is kind of this world of venture capital, almost every single company has what's called a stock option pool. Um, I don't know, like, where it actually got popularized. I think in the dot-com boom, we learned that there was so much upside of these businesses, and the way to get people excited was to get them in for sweat equity, and they'd make money on the back end. And so it's actually just become a rite of passage. Like, I don't know a single startup that doesn't have a stock options
Yeah,
package.
yeah, especially because you're trying to recruit talented people, and then they can go anywhere. So if you really don't, right? If you don't tie them into your business, I mean, they could go to the highest bidder, especially because if you're trying to do a startup, right? In any
Yeah,
field, really, you
yeah.
want talented people to come with you. Or if you're trying to exit a business, you want talented people to stay with you. And so I guess that playbook makes a lot of sense. There's a guy in the chat here. His name is No Playbook Podcast. It's what is phantom stock exactly? Are we jumping ahead here?
Um, Let me segue into that question
Okay.
actually. So to your original question, I think um, we're taking the best parts of what works in venture capital in the technology world with this idea of stock options, and we're also leaving some of the bad stuff. I think sometimes because it's just a rite of passage, these incentives can become entitlements, and then they don't actually change any behavior. If everyone gets them for just showing up, then again it becomes an entitlement, and so we don't want that. We really, when we talk to business owners and I coach business owners, it's all about what are the outcomes that you're looking to achieve, and how can incentives be designed in order to elicit the behavioral changes to get those outcomes. Now, some of the not so great properties of stock options or like traditional equity are that they actually can grant owner rights. You actually are giving a vote eventually. There's also some tax complications. When that option turns into equity, the employee has to pay tax on it as if it's income, even though there may not be any cash to pay for it. And so this is my segue into what is phantom stock exactly. It is a wonderful incentive with a terrible name that we hope to change. Basically,
Hmm.
what it is it is a promise to pay a cash bonus at a future date, usually linked to the underlying value of the company's equity. So it's cash based, meaning it doesn't actually grant those owner rights that get owners in trouble. There's no voting rights. They don't have to open the books. There's no liability on the employee. There's no tax event. But when you sell the business, for example, they'd get a bonus relative to the amount of phantom stock you gave them in the business. So it aligns them up until that sale. You can also, have them participate in distributions if you want a profit share. And again, all of these things can be aligned around goals in the business. So they're not entitlements. Like we only pay out if, we hit our net margin goal, for example.
So I have heard this before, and I haven't gone deep down it before. But so is it subjective as to when the homeowner, sorry, when the business owner actually pays out this phantom stock in most cases, or are you able to, is there framework around it that kind of like protects the employee, if that makes sense?
It makes complete sense, and that's exactly what it is, actually. In order to get the tax benefits that you get from phantom stock, it actually has to be predefined. So there's no wiggle room. That said, it's very owner friendly as well, right? It has those properties I just discussed, where a lot, one of the biggest things is you can set it up such that if the employee leaves prior to a sale, if that's how it gets paid, they forfeit. It doesn't have to be set up that way, but often it is to protect the owner, and encourage retaining those great people to an eventual outcome, whether that's a sale of the business or a milestone in the future. But
Mm,
to to your point, it is predefined. So I say when I grant this incentive to Everett, it's going to get paid either when we sell or if we hit this metric, and those are the conditions of the incentive. You can't change it
mm.
after it's been granted.
Right. So, and what's your experience? I don't hate, I hate to go down like the negative
No,
Nancy
no.
route here,
Yeah,
but like,
yeah.
what's your experience with, phantom stock being given or incentives being given, and then
Mhm.
like, ownership, leadership goes, maybe we can find a way to part ways with so and so, so that we skirt this, and we don't have to worry. It's an at-will state, so we don't have to worry about all this other, the legal ramifications of that.
Yeah, it's a fair question. I really haven't run into it at all. I think the reality is if they're a good employee that you want to keep them not only to a sale but after a sale. The most common way I see this set up is owners will have uh, basically like an earnout component for the employees where they'll get some of their payment up front and then they will get the remainder after they remain employed, after the company's sold. And that bolsts their value to the incoming buyer, because it signals to them, hey, I've got the key employees already incented to stick around and make sure that the ship keeps rowing in the right direction.
So what is the difference between phantom equity and like just saying you're getting sweat equity at this point, at this time, like it's time bound? Does phantom equity not have to do with being time bound, and it's usually incentive based on either an exit, or is there a difference?
Yeah, good question. So, traditionally, phantom stock, the difference between it and any other deferred bonus is that it is linked to the value of the company as opposed to a flat dollar amount or some other formulation. And the reason that's interesting is because it directly aligns employees with the ultimate outcome and goals of the business, because it's going to ebb and flow. The valuation may increase, it may also decrease. And so they don't ever have to owe the company anything, but the amount in which that phantom stock is worth is dictated on how much the company's worth. Whereas if you give a $5,000 cash bonus, that's flat. It's $5,000, whether the company's doing well or whether the company's doing poor. So that's one of the benefits of phantom stock.
But maybe I didn't hear it when your answer, but is there then a so company gets valued,
Yeah.
right? um I own shares in a business, or I own the phantom share in the business that once
Yeah.
it, right? So really the differential is just whether or not that share gets paid at an outcome that would be phantom, right? And having owning the stock goes, hey, I own it in your company and I can sell it back to the company, for instance, if I wanted to. Is that, am I making that correlation?
That is one difference. Yeah, the traditional equity um, could be sold, though there are always restrictions on that. The other difference is, again, when it's granted, that real equity, the employee has to pay tax on it, and that's usually a non-starter. With a company of any value, and usually an equity incentive of any size, the tax bill it's inaccessible to the average blue collar worker. Um, so that's usually where folks stop. And then again, the owners themselves, they don't want new partners. So yes, the traditional equity can be granted, and let's say you find a way to cover the tax bill, but then you're actually giving away a vote. You now have to open the books for that employee who's a partner. So phantom stock's a really great tool that aligns interests and walks and talks like ownership, but doesn't have that drawback that the traditional equity has.
But as soon as the phantom equity is triggered, at that point in time, that individual, assuming that, like, let's say it was a metric that was hit or a dollar amount, then at that point in time, they would have a vote. They would have,
No,
like, the,
they just
oh,
get
they
a
don't,
cash bonus. They just get a cash bonus.
based upon the equity of
That's
the
right. That's
valuation of
right.
the company.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep, that's right.
Interesting,
Yep.
interesting. Yes. So I've even been like, it's funny because I've had conversations with companies that, potentially were suitors, and it was one of those things where I've had this conversation, though they didn't call it phantom equity, but it was the same thing of what you're talking about. It was like, upon exit, here's what you're going to get, here's the
Yeah.
calculation.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. And so what are, so in your, is there a type of business that should not entertain this? Or like, what's the parameters? Like, like I said, like, this is like, should you give your employees equity? Like, should you? And under
Yeah.
every circumstance, is it case by case?
Yeah, so it's kind of a trick question. I think in most cases you should not give your employees real equity, but I think there's very little reason to not give your employees phantom equity. And the reason why, and I tell this to owners all the time, my job's hard because I'm educating folks on something that they may not have heard of before. Um, but there is really no cost of phantom equity for the owner. Think about this. You are giving a promise to pay a future cash bonus if and only if you sell the business. That costs you nothing.
But what's the distinction between just calling it a bonus and calling it phantom equity?
Well, I don't like the name phantom equity. We don't even call it that at Reins. Um, but the difference is you have a contract up front and it's real and it's linked to the value of the company. So therefore, your interests are also aligned with the value of the company. It teaches you to, well, the general principles of equity compensation is that you tend to take a little bit more risk. You tend to be more efficient. You tend to think about growth, the future growth of the business.
Sure.
Mm. And we focus exclusively on blue collar, where I think traditional equity, by and large, isn't the best tool for most owners for their employees. Um, but we do also help owners with other cash-based incentives like profit sharing programs and performance bonuses. So often that gives employees feedback, along the way to an eventual sale. We don't think that I think phantom stock is one of the best underrated, most unknown tools out there, and people should use it with or without our help. But it's not a silver bullet, and employees do have or can be short-sighted sometimes. And so giving them feedback, let's say on a quarterly or an annual basis, once certain goals are met. And again, it's very much like you're treating them like an owner. If certain goals are met, share a portion of the profits with them, for example. And so it's a nice sort of cocktail of incentives that not only retains employees, but it aligns their incentives with the goals of the business.
What has been the biggest challenge that you have faced in this?
Yeah, I think education is a big one, right? Folks that haven't heard of it, just getting in front of them. The biggest mistake that folks make with any incentives are that they overcomplicate them. And this goes for any type of compensation or bonus, for example. Um, they get too creative trying to um, add too many performance conditions, um, to the point where employees don't actually understand what they
Yeah,
can do.
I, man, I can't even begin to tell you that yes, I had I worked for a company and they did the exact same thing. They made it so convoluted to a point where it was almost like you didn't do it anyway. It was
Yeah,
almost like it didn't matter.
exactly.
Or
Exactly.
you set triggers that were just so, you can hit this trigger and not get it, and this trigger and not get it, and this trigger and not get it, but you got to hit all these three triggers and then you get it. And it
Yeah.
almost became like, okay, man, like, um, I guess people want something simple, right?
Yeah.
They want something that is like just makes sense. That's why like convoluted pay plans, convoluted bonus structures. So how do you talk to a business owner and like let them know like let's simplify this? Have you ever had a hard-headed business owner who's like, no, this is the way it's going to be. We're not, that. Have you ever had that happen?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Many times, unfortunately. I think they have to learn the hard way. They have to learn trial by fire.
Mhm.
I mean, some people can't be helped. They think that their way is the right way, even though it's not translating to results. I think a good example um, to that I use with owners is, again, incentives are designed to change behavior. Um, there are such thing as entitlements, bonuses in which they're almost designed like charity. And the best example of that is the Christmas bonus. And so you get what's called the Santa Claus effect, where people start, warming up and showing up around December. Um, and that's just a perfect example of something that's not really tied to performance. It's not tied to anything that's going to change behavior. And if charity is totally fine, but know the difference, right? And so, yeah, some people are bullheaded. We use our expertise in data from hundreds of incentive plans that we've helped set up for contractors to show them, here's the way forward. Um, and some of these principles are based off of our expertise. So we actually wrote a book called Alternative Equity folks that are listening can get a free copy on the website, myreins.com. But some of the opinions we have, particularly on the profit sharing side, come from other folks in the industry who have done this thousands of times. So I'm sure your audience is familiar with EOS. Those guys wrote a book called Profit Works, and a lot of our framework is built upon their principles, and they are all about simplicity, right? And so, we just take the wisdom from folks that have been in the trenches for a lot of years doing this, and when we try and educate owners to simplify their plans to get the right outcome.
So everybody can go to reins.com, get a free book on employee equity.
Myreins.com.
And then okay, so obviously you're going to get their information. They're interested in doing it. You can walk them through it. And so what would you say to like someone who is, it's going to be a legacy business, not so much they want to
Yeah.
exit or they want to
Yep.
sell the business one day, like there's kids involved. Is that dealt with differently?
We get that a lot. So all you would do is you change the payment trigger on the phantom stock. And so instead of it paying on a sale, although a lot of people say they're never going to sell, a lot of people say it's a legacy business. And I can't tell you how many times I get a call from a customer that says, I'm fielding 5 offers right now, but you would just change the payment trigger. So, but legacy businesses need to grow. They need to print off cash, right? And so you can pay a percentage of phantom equity when you hit a certain EBITDA goal or a certain gross revenue goal. And then you can layer on a profit share that pays employees on a quarterly basis if we hit, our net profit. And so you just change the plan.
Do you build in the sale trigger anyway, just in the event that they
Yes,
decide
almost
to change
always. Yeah, almost always.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I think you're muted, Everett.
How are these structures? How similar are these? Are they really unique? Do you find that each one is custom made, or do you find that you are creating, basically the same outline for each one?
The latter. So we encourage the folks that we work with at least to fall within a very, finite set of guardrails, and that's because, the general wisdom is to keep it simple. Here are the properties for this type of business that make sense. So, a simple plan is, I set aside, let's say 10% of the company for the benefit of employees. That's shared, amongst a handful of my key folks. They get paid on the 10% of the future sale price should the business sell. They forfeit the equity if they leave prior to it. And that's 90% of plans. That said, there's customization that can be done and is done depending on the goals of that individual business.
Okay. And what would you say to someone who is currently maybe looking at ways that he can incentivize or she can incentivize their staff, but they're very resistant to this? I mean, you've seen this before. I imagine you've
Oh
seen
yeah.
this before, right? What would you say to somebody? Like, do you have data to show that like this was when we designed it, and look at the retention, look at the profits, look at the business afterwards? Do you have data to show?
Yeah, we've had customers sell. We just visited a customer that sold and shared over $500,000 with I think 11 employees in a rural county in the middle of the country. Really, really cool story. He sold for great terms for the buyer he wanted, so it bolstered the value of his company. I would also say to these owners, besides these case studies, again, think about the pain. Think about the quantification of pain here. 50 to 200% of an employee's salary if you lose them. So, if someone's making $100,000, you could be paying $100,000 just to replace them before you even get someone in the seat that's productive. Um, and then another stat that's kind of interesting is over 90% of employees who have been offered an incentive through at least Reins, our platform, are still employed with those companies today. So it is a huge, huge difference when you differentiate yourself with these types of incentives with offers. It's not about just keeping those employees that you currently have, but it's also about, how do you set yourself apart when you want to recruit folks onto the team that maybe you otherwise couldn't afford and compete with in the pool of talent in your, local area.
Mm. I'm going to pivot here for a second. So the name of this podcast is "So I Was in This House," and I know you
Yeah.
spent 5 years with your dad
Yep.
in the business, right? And
Yeah.
here's what I find. I find that when we have conversations on here, and we talk, shop, I think everybody gets really engaged. But oftentimes, I think sometimes, in sales in general, right? Um, Usually, it's great storytelling,
Mhm.
and that was the genesis of this. That's why I love this podcast. I love to tell the journey, right? So let me ask you a question. Along the road here, right? I ask one question on every podcast, and here's how it goes. Um, what is one experience that you've had? Now, typically it would be a customer experience, and if you were riding in the truck with your dad and everything else, it would potentially be in a house, right? So the story would start. So I was in this house. That shaped you in some sort of way, that was momentous, that in some way was so profound that you carry it with you wherever you go. I like these to be customer experiences. It doesn't have to be. It could be an experience that you had, in Reins in this business. So what do you have something?
Yeah. Well, you mean like it relates to Reins and one of our
It
customers?
doesn't
Is that what
have
you
to.
mean? Yeah.
Ideally, it's just
Yeah.
something that happened to you
Yeah.
in the past at some point in time. Let me give you a great example.
Yeah.
I had a service technician who would go to somebody's house. They would call them out there and just to chat, just to visit, just to say hi. And they created this relationship together and they play
Mhm.
chess together. And he was just a service technician and she was just this old lady that was lonely in the house. And they bonded. They had a friendship, and actually, she ended up passing away. And she left him something in the will, and it
Oh,
was like
wow.
something stupid in the house. Maybe it was a chessboard, whatever it was, but like that was something that what we do in our field, and it changed, his life. And so
Yeah.
those are the things that I look for. So, what's one experience that you've had that lives with you wherever you go?
If you don't mind, I'll say two really quick ones. So
Yeah.
the first one
So
is
you
just
went from 0 to 2, by the way. I just want to
yeah.
let you know.
Yeah, your example was great. Um, I think just working for my old man and working in the blue collar industry, like it's no surprise I'm very white collar now. I own a tech company. That said, the 5 years I did spend on the trucks, I think was very formative. I think just the fact that I had to work with my hands, I was on construction sites, I was crawling through the ceilings of grocery stores, pulling cable. Um, I was installing hidden cameras at 3 a.m. on Christmas Day, trying to, catch people, doing God knows what in the freezer of grocery stores in the
Is that
back. Like,
right? You were installing hidden cameras in freezers?
well, so we work for the loss prevention department, and all kinds of crazy shit would happen. And the coolers were a hot spot. They were a hotbed for either theft, grazing. People were having sex in the coolers. All kinds of stuff were happening. So we would go in there on holidays and off hours to install hidden cameras when there was an issue. But I think just working with my hands, like, is just such a I mean, this is probably not any news to this audience, but just very, very formative, and I take it with me, and it's helped me in this this company, obviously, I can relate to folks. Like I've actually done it. I've actually been out on the trucks. So that definitely shaped me. The story I have with a customer, I didn't really know what the outcomes of some of these programs would be for real people. And I've flown all over the country and met employees in these rural towns working for these HVAC businesses, plumbing businesses. And when you talk to them after they've received a little bit of equity, phantom equity in the business, even the founder of this company was surprised at how grateful and how much it actually impacted their thought process in the company. And just hearing stories of like a gentleman who showed his wife what he had. He had the Reins app on his phone, and he showed her that he had skin in the game of this business, and she's like, "Oh, you've got a career."
Yeah.
Like that actually really surprised me in a very pleasant way. So that definitely I carry with me.
Yeah. I mean, it's fulfilling, right? I mean,
Yeah,
somebody says you got a piece of this thing,
that's right.
and then you walk away with a couple of pesos,
That's
and
right.
everybody's really, yeah, it's like I love this. I actually think it's a good culture piece too. Like
Yeah, it
I
is.
would I would encourage anybody who listens to this video, audio, whatever, if you're in a position where you think that this could work. And I don't. This is not a commercial. I don't. Reigns is not sponsoring this podcast. I don't get anything out of this, but I love this concept. Now you're right. I don't think many people really know how to do that, and the service you provide is valuable.
Yeah.
And let me ask you. So I mean, do you just have conversations with people, like you consult for free for them, like just to give them information so that you can potentially like, in other words, if somebody wants to just tread in the water a little bit, dip their feet in a little bit, will you guide them a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that is the burden, but also the pleasure that we have, being sort of like one of one. We want to educate the masses on these great incentives. And I echo your sentiment. I don't care if you use reins or not. I highly encourage folks to think about implementing simple performance-based incentives like phantom stock and profit sharing, because in most cases it doesn't cost you anything, and they can really, like you said, shift culture in these businesses and change things.
Hmm. While we wind down here, let me ask you, you got anything anything you're working on, anything that's exciting, anything that you want to share, plug, et cetera, et cetera?
We're working on all kinds of great product initiatives here. Um, we just recently launched our bonus product, so it allows you to um, basically build performance bonuses into the system, where historically we just did profit sharing and phantom stock. So that is live. That's super exciting. But yeah, more than anything, there's a ton of free resources on our website. And yeah, we're happy to chat with you. Give us a call. And yeah, we'd love to help and just guide you on your journey, whether it's today or 12 months from now.
Very cool. I do have one more question for you. Maybe
Yeah.
this is, I should have asked earlier, but like, what is the biggest challenge that businesses will face when they're trying to implement this?
Well, uh, I think you kind
Like,
of
are
you
there
did.
hurdles? Is it legal? Is it financial? Is it like the terminology? Is it attorneys? Like, what is it?
Yeah, I think you did my sales pitch for me, because these things exist outside of Reigns, right? Our solution is that we make it very simple, affordable, and accessible. So how do we do that? Well, we use technology. We also have you kind of alluded to this. We have a templatized legal framework. So we do all the heavy lifting for the business owner that they would have otherwise had to go and reinvent the wheel on their own. And so the traditional way of doing this is you go to an attorney, you spend 30 grand on a fancy compensation attorney to draft this bespoke incentive plan, and then all you're left with is a piece of paper. Well, we use technology to drop that cost down to a fraction of that. We consult with the customer to design the plan that makes sense for them by using our technology. But then they're not left with a piece of paper. They have a living, breathing incentive tool that they can grant new incentives, track the existing incentives, and employees can see in real time what their incentives are worth and what they can actually do in order to, increase the value of that or earn more. And so, uh, self-servingly, the challenges that folks typically run into is they don't know where to get started. They probably have like a local strip mall attorney who's like, Phantom, what? Like, yeah, maybe. Like, I could probably draft something up. Um, and or they, like you said, we talked about, they just complicate it. They're like, I want it to be tied to this, that, and that, the other thing. And so that's why you need a framework that has a finite amount of options that makes this simple for them to implement and for employees to understand, more importantly, right?
Mm. Very, very cool. Hey, man, I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. I got a couple announcements I'm going to make, but dude, good luck. Anybody that wants to, it's Reins, REINS.com, correct?
myreins.com.
My Reins, MYREINS.com.
You got it.
Talk to Chris. Very, very cool. I appreciate you, dude. I'm going to get you off stage here for a sec. Hey, guys, sorry about the technical flubs. I'm going to put this all together. It's going to be great. Make sure you please give My Method AI a call. Go to the website. One of the things that we were working on was, or they were working on, was that the assistant does inbound and outbound calls. And one of the things that kind of differentiates them from, and this is kind of neat, is that it does, it learns. So as your business learns, it's customizable, which is really cool because some of these are right out of the box and that's how they function. And these guys have been doing AI for like 9 years or something like that. So very, very cool. Appreciate you guys. And I got a ton of guests coming on. I'm not even going to list them. It's so many. Appreciate you guys. See you.